They said she went to Yemen to help. Maybe that was true. But behind every mission is a whisper, a need to be seen, to matter. Claire Bennett, 34, nurse, believer in mercy and media. She wanted to heal and to be remembered for it. When her convoy was taken on a dirt road outside Taiz, the headlines called her the nurse who wouldn't break. But headlines forget. What the world never saw was the sand, the hunger, the way faith cracks when there's no one left to watch you believe. This is not a rescue story. It's the anatomy of pride, stripped to the bone. The desert doesn't end when you leave it. It lives under the skin, in the quiet, in the thirst that no water can cure. Claire Bennett sits in a studio now, London light slanting across the glass. The interviewer adjusts her mic, asks softly, "Do you still believe in God?" Claire exhales. "I believe in mercy," she says. Then after a pause, "But I don't know if He believed in me." The recording light flicks on. Somewhere in the booth, the producer gestures, "Keep going." But Claire's eyes have drifted. The voice she begins to use is not for them. It's for herself. "I used to think saving people was holy work, that every wound I cleaned, every pulse I kept alive, was proof that I was good." In training, they told us, compassion doesn't need witnesses. But I wanted witnesses. I wanted to be the kind of woman people remembered, the one who went where others wouldn't. I remember the first camera crew that filmed me in Yemen. I smiled too long. My hands shook, not from fear, but from excitement. There's something dangerous about wanting to look brave. They said the desert changes you. They didn't say it would show you who you've been pretending to be. When she first returned home, Claire couldn't stand mirrors. Hospitals, interviews, welcome receptions. Everything blurred into noise. People clapped when she walked in. Some cried. She smiled, because that's what survivors do. But inside, she felt like a fraud. The nightmares didn't come as dreams. They came as sounds. The slow click of a rifle being cleaned. The rasp of a man's breath when fever hits. The sand scraping against a tent at night, like whispers that never end. Her therapist told her to speak about it, so she began with confession. Not to God, but to a microphone. They call me the nurse who wouldn't break. But I did. Just not where they could see it. There were days I hated the people I was supposed to help. Days I treated wounds just to feel useful, not kind. I told myself I was surviving, but really, I was bargaining. I thought, if I endure enough, someone will come. If I'm good enough, someone will save me. But goodness doesn't buy freedom. It only keeps you alive long enough to learn that. The interview runs 43 minutes. When it ends, the sound engineer wipes his eyes. Claire doesn't notice. She's still somewhere else, in a tent of yellow light, with the desert wind whispering through holes in the fabric. Outside the studio, rain begins to fall on the London pavement. For the first time in years, she looks up, and she realizes she's still waiting for something. Not rescue, not applause, but understanding. She whispers, barely audible to the mic, "Faith isn't believing you'll be saved. It's doing good even when you won't be. Confession isn't about forgiveness. It's about remembering who you were before the noise." It began with a letter, or maybe with a headline. "British nurses join humanitarian mission in Yemen." The kind of story Claire used to read over morning coffee, admiring the courage from afar. Now, she wanted to be that story. When her contract at St. Mary's expired, she told herself she was restless. In truth, she was invisible. 34, single, still renting the same flat she'd shared since university. Her colleagues liked her. Her patients thanked her. But no one remembered her. So when the relief organization called for volunteers, Claire said yes before the recruiter finished the sentence. She told friends it was for something bigger than myself. But deep down, it was something smaller, a whisper. Let them finally see me. I thought war would make me useful, that suffering would give my compassion a purpose. The world seemed so numb. I wanted to feel something raw, real, sacred. When the plane descended over Sana'a, the desert looked endless, like a faded map no one had dared redraw. Children waved as we drove through villages of dust and prayer. I told myself this was destiny. But destiny doesn't wear a vest with a red cross. It wears a smile that hides fear. Claire joined a small mobile clinic operating along the western corridor near Taiz, a front line that shifted daily like sand in wind. Most of her team were veterans of crisis zones, silent, efficient, pragmatic. They measured heroism by survival rates, not stories.
Claire tried to match them, but she was the one who brought a camera, the one who wrote journal entries meant to be read one day, perhaps published. At night, she'd record voice notes on her phone. If anyone ever hears this, I want them to know what it's like to hold life in your hands while death sits outside the tent. Maybe then they'll understand why I came. Her tone wasn't arrogance. It was longing. But longing in a war zone is a dangerous fuel. Days in Yemen blurred between mercy and exhaustion. Gunfire in the distance, the metallic taste of fear when a convoy passed, the smell of iodine and sweat, the laughter of children playing between bombed walls. Each small victory, a wound closed, a baby breathing, made her feel almost divine. She began to believe she could outrun death. And when the team leader, Dr. Khaled, warned her not to travel on Fridays, too risky, checkpoints change, she smiled and said, "If we wait for safety, we'll never move." He frowned. "You sound like a journalist, not a nurse." But Claire was already packing the truck. I wanted to reach the village by sunset. They said people were dying there. No antibiotics, no midwives, nothing. I couldn't let them wait. But that's not the truth. I wanted to be seen going. I wanted that photograph, the nurse against the orange desert sky, carrying hope into danger. I called it duty. It was vanity. The road wound through dry valleys, dust rising like ghosts behind the tires. Her driver, Amir, barely spoke English. He kept the radio low, prayer recitations between static. The world felt suspended, unreal, cinematic. Then, the crack of gunfire. The truck lurched, tires shredded. A voice screamed in Arabic, "Stop!" Out. In the chaos, Claire saw the desert swallow the horizon. 5 men, 1 flag, the sun burning behind their rifles. She froze, her mind flicking to absurd details. The water bottle rolling under the seat, the half-written note on her lap. Heroism is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act anyway. Someone tore her bag away. Her camera hit the ground, lens cracking. A boot crushed it. That was the last image she owned of herself. I remember the heat first, then the blindfold, then the silence. That kind of silence that sounds like breathing from a distance. Someone said, "She's a doctor?" Another voice, "No, a nurse." Then laughter. That was the moment I understood what it means to be powerless. Not when they point the gun, but when they decide your worth in a single word. They drove for hours, maybe days. In captivity, time dissolves into sand. When the blindfold came off, Claire was inside a tent, surrounded by men who didn't know what to do with her. One of them was wounded. They pointed to her medical kit. Her hands shook as she treated him, not from fear, but from recognition. In that instant, she remembered why she came. Not for applause, not for God, for this, the simple act of healing, even when no one will thank you for it. I thought ambition would make me brave, but in the desert, it only made me visible, and being visible made me a target. Sometimes the road to virtue begins with vanity. The camp was nothing like the stories she had imagined. No cages, no visible cruelty, just heat, sand, and the slow decay of hope. They didn't beat her, they didn't free her, they made her useful. When Claire first dressed the wound of her captor, she did it with shaking hands and a nurse's instinct. When he lived, they began to trust her, or maybe just depend on her. Within days, she was tending to them all. Fevers, infections, burns from gun oil and sunlight. Her clinic was a rug, a tin tray, and whatever she could beg for. In a world stripped of purpose, she found one again, and that frightened her most. At first, I counted days. Then I counted patience. Then I stopped counting altogether. They called me Rama, Mother of Mercy. The name sounded holy, but it was a curse. Mercy means surrender when it isn't a choice. The commander, Yusuf, used to watch me work. He never touched me. That almost made it worse. He said I reminded him of his sister. I think he meant it as kindness. One night, he brought me tea, hot, sweet, heavy with mint. He asked, "Why do you help us?" I said, "Because I must." He smiled. "Then you are freer than us." It sounded like respect. It was ownership disguised as awe. The desert nights were cold. Claire would wrap herself in a blanket that smelled of gunpowder and sleep between crates of medicine. Sometimes she'd wake to the sound of distant bombing, the thud, the delay, then the tremor. She began to dream in Arabic. The word sabr, patience, echoed in her mind like a commandment. Her pride, the thing that had driven her into the desert, softened into obedience. She learned to survive by listening, by healing, by disappearing. But part of her began to like the rhythm of it, the strange peace of control amid chaos. Here, her worth was undeniable. Men who carried rifles bowed their heads when she entered the tent. They depended on her hands. She, who once longed for recognition, now had it, in a warlord's camp. They feared me, in a way, not because I had power, but because I carried life. Every bandage, every injection. I felt like a god hiding in the skin of a prisoner. I told myself it was survival, but it was pride again, creeping through the cracks of despair. When Yusuf was wounded in a raid, they dragged him to me, bleeding, trembling. He said, "Save me, and I will protect you." I didn't hesitate. My hands moved faster than thought. I pressed the gauze, sutured the skin, whispered prayers I no longer believed. When he opened his eyes again, the men cheered. Someone shouted, "She is blessed!" And I believed them. Days blurred into ritual. Tea, wounds, prayers, silence. Sometimes she would wash her hands and stare at the water, tinted pink from blood, and wonder who she was healing anymore. The boundaries of morality began to dissolve. Kindness, fear, duty, vanity. All one color in the sand.
In the evenings, Yusuf would talk to her about the world before the war, about his wife, lost in an airstrike, about the doctor who refused to treat his son because of politics. She listened. She pitied him. She forgot, for moments, that he was her captor. When he called her sister, she felt safe. When he called her angel, she felt seen. And that was the beginning of her second captivity, not of body, but of belief. I thought mercy would redeem me, but mercy can seduce you too. Each time they said, "Thank you," I felt a strange warmth. Not love, not trust, but need. I had become essential, and essential feels powerful. I began to bargain with my conscience. If I help them, they will spare me. If I stay kind, they will see I'm good. If I stay useful, I will matter. But usefulness is just another kind of chain. When the Red Cross negotiators radioed the rebels for proof of life, Yusuf refused. "She's not a prisoner," he said. "She's our doctor." Claire didn't argue. She could have screamed her name, begged for rescue. She didn't. Because deep down, she feared what freedom would mean. That outside the camp, she was ordinary again. Unseen. Forgotten. Inside, she was needed. And that need became her drug. The nights were longest when no one was sick. I'd sit by the lantern, staring at my hands, cracked, stained, trembling. They looked like someone else's. I told myself I was surviving, but part of me was thriving. I liked their respect, their gratitude, the illusion that I was saving lives again, even if those lives carried guns. Every touch made forgetting easier. Every prayer buried another truth. Months passed. Claire no longer counted them. She no longer dreamed of rescue. Her name in the news had faded. Her story was no longer trending. But in that silence, she found a strange, feverish peace. A world where she was both prisoner and priestess, healer and hostage. The indulgence wasn't pleasure, it was purpose. A counterfeit grace she couldn't yet refuse. Desire makes every sin sound like a choice. It began with a cough. A boy no older than 15, his ribs sharp beneath the skin, his eyes glassy with fever. Claire thought it was dehydration at first. Then the others started coughing too. Within a week, the camp stank of sickness. The air itself turned wet with fear. Flies gathered around the wounded. The sun no longer burned. It pressed. She boiled water until her fingers blistered, rationed what few antibiotics remained. Yusuf watched her like a man cornered by God. "Fix them," he said, as if she could fix the end of the world. I thought healing would save me. But healing, here, was just another way to watch people die slower. They began to call me the cursed nurse. The men who once bowed their heads now spat near the tent. Yusuf didn't stop them. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe he believed them too. I stopped looking at mirrors. Even the water's reflection felt like judgment. The woman staring back wasn't a savior. She was a disease that learned to speak softly. The sickness spread through the camp like wind. 2 men buried at dawn, another at dusk. No prayers this time, just shallow graves and silence. Claire's hands, once worshipped, were now feared. Each death dimmed her authority, until she became what she had been at the start, a foreigner, expendable, a symbol of misplaced hope. When Yusuf fell ill, the others turned on her. "You poisoned us," one shouted. "She cursed him," another hissed. They dragged her out of the tent, tied her hands, left her in the sun. She tried to pray, but the words stuck in her throat, dry as dust. I used to believe that goodness was armor, that if I stayed kind,
No harm could reach me. But kindness here had no currency. It only made me easier to blame. They left me under the sky. No food, no water. I stopped asking why. Pride keeps you alive, at first. Then it becomes a weight you can't carry. I whispered my own name to remember I existed. Claire, Claire, Claire. It sounded foreign, like a word from another life. Hours turned to hallucinations. The desert pulsed, alive with color and heat. She saw her mother's face, then her own. A mirror cracked into sand. When night came, she expected death. Instead, she woke to a hand shaking her shoulder. It was Yusuf, pale, sweating, trembling. He untied her wrists. "You're still a healer," he whispered. "Heal me." I should have hated him. I didn't. Because when someone is dying, all hatred feels small. I worked through the night, tore my own shirt to make bandages, used salt water when medicine ran out. He looked at me and said, "Why do you help me?" I said, "Because I need to believe I'm still human." He laughed, a soft, dying sound. "You already were," he said. "You just forgot." He died before dawn. The next morning, the camp was empty. Some fled, some lay still. Claire stayed. She sat beside Yusuf's body until the flies grew thick. Her hands shook. For the first time since her capture, she wept. Not for him, not for herself, but for the hollow space between mercy and pride that she had lived inside for months. When the relief convoy finally arrived, guided by a drone signal, they found her half-conscious, sitting in the sand, hands still bloody from tending the dead. They asked her name. She hesitated, then said, "I don't know yet." The same bar, the same face, the same lie. That's what my mind became, a loop. Each memory replayed until it lost its meaning. I smiled slower now. The laughter came late. They called me a survivor, but survival isn't living. It's the ghost that forgets to die. Back in London, she tried to speak about it. Journalists, doctors, friends, all wanted her story, not her silence. She gave them both, but the story they wanted was the one that ended with rescue, not the one that never really ended at all. They showed her the headlines. "Nurse freed after 217 days in captivity." She stared at the number. It felt smaller than her guilt. When the applause came, she felt sick. Everyone asked what it was like, being kidnapped, surviving, losing hope. No one asked what it's like to lose yourself while pretending to be good. I told them, it's like holding your breath for so long you forget the sound of air. She returned to the hospital 6 months later, different ward, different nameplate, no cameras this time. When a patient thanked her, she just nodded. There was no holiness left in her work, only truth. And sometimes truth is enough. I kept paying for the night, until the night asked for me. The desert had released her body, but not her mind. For months after the rescue, Claire woke at dawn, expecting the call to prayer. Even in London, she could still smell the sand. Iron, sweat, sun. Freedom felt too bright, too loud. She kept her curtains half closed. Silence was the only language that made sense. They told me I was safe. They said I was home. But home is a word you forget after captivity. I'd sit by the window, listening to the rain, and think of the desert wind. How it sounded like breathing when I couldn't. Sometimes I missed it. Not the fear, not the hunger, but the stillness. Because in stillness, nothing lies to you. Therapy came in beige rooms with soft-voiced counselors. They wanted her to talk about trauma. She wanted to talk about guilt. "How did you survive?" they asked. "I worked," she said. Why did you work for them? I didn't. I worked through them. But that answer didn't fit their form. They wanted neat arcs, pain, redemption, recovery. She only had circles. I kept thinking about that boy, the first one who coughed, about Yusuf and the tea and the word mercy. It means compassion in English. It means surrender in Arabic. Maybe both are the same. Sometimes, at night, I'd hear my mother's voice. Not the real one, but the one I remembered. Eat while it's hot, or it'll turn cold like your heart. And I'd laugh quietly, because she never said that, but the desert did. Claire's faith had not vanished. It had changed shape. She no longer prayed to be seen or saved or remembered. Instead, she prayed for small things, steady hands, clean water, a patient's breath. Her redemption wasn't cinematic. It was domestic. In her kitchen, she kept a small jar of Yemeni sand, not as a souvenir, as a warning. Every time she looked at it, she remembered the cost of being worshipped. The desert taught me silence. Silence that scours pride, strips noise from thought. There, words meant survival. Here, they mean performance. People talk about resilience as if it's glory. It isn't. It's maintenance. I'm not who I was before Yemen, but maybe that's the mercy. To lose the person who believed she needed to be admired. One afternoon, Claire visited a mosque in Whitechapel. No cameras, no ceremony, just curiosity, or maybe reverence. She removed her shoes, sat in the back as women prayed in silence. Their heads bowed, their movements fluid, disciplined. No applause, no spectacle. For the first time in years, she felt peace without performance. When an old woman offered her tea afterward, Claire accepted. The woman smiled and said, "You are nurse." Claire nodded. "Then you are already blessed." The words landed differently this time. Not as praise, but permission. I used to think redemption was a stage, something you stand on after you've learned your lesson. But it's not a stage. It's a hallway. Long, dim, quiet. You walk it every day, and no one claps at the end. Some nights I still dream of the camp, the hum of the lantern, the sound of breathing, the faces of the men I both healed and feared. I don't hate them anymore. Hate is heavy. I need my hands free. The rain stopped outside. Claire opened the window. The sound of the city drifted in. Sirens, footsteps, life. She took a deep breath and whispered, "Mercy." Not as a plea, as a truth. The memory of home is the loudest sermon. London, 2 years later. The world had already moved on. New wars, new names, new headlines. Claire Bennett lived quietly now. No interviews, no cameras. She worked in a small hospice outside the city. Patients with failing lungs, failing hearts, failing time. Here, the only stories were the ones whispered between breaths. She liked it that way. I used to think the end of the story was freedom, but it's not. It's service without witness. Every day I wash hands, change sheets, adjust morphine drips. No one takes pictures. No one writes my name. Sometimes a patient will look at me and say, "Thank you, nurse." And I'll smile, because for the first time, that word, nurse, feels enough. She rarely spoke about Yemen. The few who knew called it "what happened," as if it were a storm that passed, but inside her, it never quite cleared. She kept small rituals, folding linens a certain way, boiling tea exactly 3 minutes. Every act was a quiet rebellion against chaos, a way of saying, "I am still here." On her desk sat that same jar of sand. Next to it, a stethoscope, 2 symbols of the same thing, fragility and faith. I used to want to be remembered. Now, I just want to remember rightly. There are days when the memory comes back, the faces, the fever, the smell of dust, but I don't flinch anymore. I let it sit beside me, like an old friend who's finally stopped shouting. Because forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's living without needing to forget. In spring, she began teaching again, short workshops for new nurses. No hero speeches, no global missions. Just simple truths. Don't rush what hurts. Listen before you touch. Mercy isn't medicine. It's the space you make for pain. The students adored her quiet authority, though few knew its cost. One afternoon, after class, a young volunteer asked, "Would you ever go back?" Claire smiled gently. "I never left," she said. The world thinks survival is strength, but it's not. Strength is what comes after. The soft, steady refusal to let what broke you define what's left. I'm not a saint. I'm not even brave. I'm just someone who learned that doing good means nothing if you need applause to do it. Maybe that's what the desert was trying to teach me. Not punishment, purification. That evening, the hospice was quiet. Rain pressed gently against the glass. Claire walked the hallway, checking each room. In one, an old Yemeni man, terminal cancer, whispered a prayer under his breath. She recognized the rhythm. It was sabr, patience. She placed her hand over his, and for a moment, the years folded in on themselves. The tent, the lantern, the sand, the silence. But this time she wasn't trapped inside them. She was tending to them. They say captivity ends when the doors open. That's a lie. Captivity ends when you stop needing to be seen. Now, when I walk home at night, I still hear echoes, voices, prayers, wind over sand. But they don't haunt me anymore. They remind me. Peace isn't clean. It's made of scars that don't hurt anymore. Outside, the city hums, the sound of buses, sirens, small miracles of ordinary life. Claire pauses at a crosswalk, the rain soft against her face. Across the street, a young nurse helps an old man into a taxi. Claire smiles. No applause, no witness. Only the quiet knowledge that the world still needs mercy, and that she, once broken, still knows how to give it. Peace begins where pleasure once ended, archived in a forgotten hard drive. At the end, before the producer cuts the mic, Claire's voice fades in one last time. If anyone ever hears this, don't call me brave. Just call me human.